Hi guys! So first off, right off the bat, I just want to say I know that you're going to be seeing this a little bit later than what it's said on the schedule. I've been feeling a little sick and unwell. I'm still recovering a little bit. I feel a lot better today and yesterday than I did over the weekend, but I'm just kind of pushing through right now so I can get this done because I definitely wanted to do this because there's a lot of energy going on here. And so the kind of wave of energy of all this stuff kind of alchemically mixing together is kind of gonna go on until I'd say probably even after the 11/11 portal, as they're calling it. I'd say it might even go on till the next new moon, so until I do my next video. I don't always feel that way about these lunar transits. Sometimes I feel like, okay, maybe this week to next week, you'll feel some of this stuff going on. And like with some very major things like the solar eclipse, that was like a all month long kind of energy that was concentrated, especially around the time that the actual solar eclipse happened in October. So, and then we had just yesterday, a few days ago, the lunar eclipse in Taurus. And I feel like because the sun was still in Scorpio, we were kind of getting like a repeating theme a little bit here. I would even say that we also are in a season where the lunar south node is in Scorpio and the lunar north node is in Taurus. So what was really interesting about this is this always happens during the fall eclipse season. You get the Scorpio Taurus energy. However, because of where the lunar nodes are at and because of all this other stuff going on, it feels like it's kind of resonating with, almost like harmonizing with that theme of the lunar nodes, because now we have a lunar eclipse in Taurus. So it was almost like the solar eclipse we had in Scorpio in October was really shining a light on a lot of things that needed to be kind of purged. And with the lunar eclipse in Taurus, I feel like you're doing a lot of reflecting on how you want to move forward. Or like at least on a collective level, that's where people are at. And this can be a bit, I don't know if anybody else has been feeling it, but it can be a bit exhausting and draining. I think some people have been a bit energized by it positively. It can depend on what's going on in your personal chart and how, what your personal transits are and where this eclipse is falling in your houses and all sorts of other things. But I would say that for the collective and for me personally, and probably for a lot of people, this can feel like a bit of a, because you're dealing with dying energy, right? That can be literal sometimes, but for a lot of people, this is just talking about spiritually letting some things kind of go and figuring out what it is that is sort of immortal to you, right? What is perennial? What is evergreen? We are entering that season now where we are moving into Sagittarius soon, after just a few weeks here. And I was going to talk about how historically Samhain would have been closer to the cusp between Sagittarius and Scorpio, before the precession of the equinoxes that split where sidereal and tropical astrology considers the zodiac to be. We would have also had, if you ever look at like documentaries where people will talk about, well, what is this monolith built for? It's like, oh, it lines up with the sunrise. Well, it doesn't now, but it would have 5,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago when it was built. With the precession of the equinoxes, where exactly west and east appear to be to us and where the sun rises, it's still obviously in the general same direction, but it just moves ever so slightly. And so with Samhain being the time when the sun rises behind the hill of Tara, the burial mounds in Ireland, and all of that is going on, that is when this would have traditionally have been, probably most likely. Again, because so much of what Druid culture actually celebrated and how they went about it, we have to kind of piece together through what we have now. We know that Halloween is still, to this day, something that we kind of secularly celebrate, but it's still around for most of the culture, in the West at least, and it's kind of been transported to the East because of globalization and the hegemony of Western culture. But traditionally it would have been probably around the time of 29 degrees Scorpio, 0 degrees Sagittarius, maybe even earlier, like 26, 27 degrees Scorpio. Who knows when it would have actually started. But I was going to get into that a little bit more as well, because as I'm talking about the lunar nodes, there's also some significance with the constellations and the actual stars here going on. So I'll just do a quick run through of what was going on earlier this month and what's going to be going on for the rest of this month and even into the beginning of December. So we talked last time in the last video about how I think the moon was near Saturn. That's the dying planet. That's yeah, I think, let me see if I still have that. Yeah, so the moon was visibly near Saturn after sunset, right around, basically on the day of Dia de los Muertos. And that, of course, was the traditional planet of death before Pluto as a planet was discovered, relating to Cronus, the Titan, instead of Hades. Both death energy in their own ways. Very much a facing of your fears and your insecurities and how it creates chaos in your life instead of order, because Saturn is a planet of order and everything having a specific timing, very father time energy, positive things, but in its shadow is Cronus, this being that kind of thwarts its own plans by self-sabotage through angering his children, through having a very fearful mindset. And it's near the moon where our subconscious emotions and emotional needs were. And it also talks about karma in terms of like consequences. These can be good consequences if you've put in a lot of hard work, because Saturn represents that as well. But it can also be negative consequences if you've made some errors in judgment or you haven't really put in the effort needed. But then we go from that into just a few days later, the moon is near Jupiter. That's Zeus energy. That's a very benevolent energy. It's forgiving. Yes, Zeus and Jupiter can have this larger than life and, you know, can have like a wrath of the gods kind of energy as well. But generally, most of the time, because he's at the seat of the culture gods, the 9th house of culture, travel, diplomacy, this is something that you're moving from out of that shadow and into a more positive sphere. Similarly, we moved from the solar eclipse in Scorpio to the lunar eclipse in Taurus with the sun still in Scorpio. That south node to north node energy I was talking about, there's kind of a mirroring here. There's a similarity to this pattern. And because Taurus is, of course, ruled by Venus, another benefic alongside Jupiter, and also very concerned with justice, diplomacy. In the sign of Taurus, sensual things. What is it that you want to manifest? What is it you actually want to physically have and experience? What stability are you looking for? And so you're moving out of this chaotic kind of death energy, this slowing away of whatever it is that's weighing you down. And that slowing away is a good thing, but it can feel a bit exhausting, right? It feels like it takes a lot out of you, because it does. It takes a lot out of you. Maybe it takes a lot out of you that no longer serves, but it still feels like it takes a lot out of you. And it might take some time for you to feel that cup refilled again. Luckily, Jupiter is very generous and abundant and giving, so you're going to probably feel the residual energy of that transit as the month continues on into December, when we're literally entering the season of gift giving, right? In generous Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter. So I found it very interesting how all of that was going on, very in harmony with the other energies of the lunar transits at the same time. So for as long as Greco-Roman astrology has been in Ireland, it has been at 15 degrees Scorpio for tropical astrology. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what that means for us, because when Samhain probably first began, you were at the cusp between fixed sign and a mutable sign. So a mutable sign is changing, and the sign of Sagittarius, we're talking about moving from death into life. And Sagittarius is bordered by two kind of death energies, right? Scorpio and Capricorn. So it's, and then after Capricorn, you move into Aquarius and Pisces, that kind of final death, the ascension of the spirit into the heavens, into this very Uranian, Neptunian, dreamy, heavenly bodies energy. Whereas in Scorpio, you're moving from kind of a more physical death. It literally is represented by decay, the decaying of the fall leaves, right, in many climates. And you're moving from that ongoing autumn, just persisting, fixed energy, into transition. A lot of people, depending on where your climate is, of course, but this is still symbolic and something that you can take away as just like a lesson from nature, just to understand it wherever you are. You're moving from that into the first snowfall. And in a way that's, you know, Sagittarius is this fire sign, right? You're bringing warmth into the cold. It's representative of the hunter, the centaur with the archer, with the bow and arrow, the archer of the centaurs, and finding new subsistence strategies. Literally, you're going from a time where you have abundant harvest before Scorpio, right, in Libra, Virgo, Leo, and then you're moving into, well, now the harvest is over. You can't do any more harvesting. You're moving into the sign of the hunter. And after that, the sign of resilience, right? The mountain goat that can climb mountains, and you look at it doing it and you're like wondering, how the heck is it doing that? And then after resilience, you know, ultimate ascension. And I feel like that is kind of symbolic as well of what we're experiencing right now, is change. We're moving out of this fixed, stubborn energy, because when you're talking about the rebirth that you get with Scorpio, as opposed to other signs like, say, Aries, it's the rebirth of spring after the winter is over. Both traditionally ruled by Mars, by the way. Very physical rebirth before Pluto was discovered. You're moving out of that very stubborn energy of the long process of decay, right? And ultimately into the realm of the dead with Hades, Pluto. And you're moving into a very spiritual sign of Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter. So nowadays it's in the middle of Scorpio. So we're kind of at a point where when Samhain happens, you're going to be with your ancestors a bit longer. You're going to be with the veil still thin a fair bit after Samhain actually happens, until the Sagittarius season begins, I would say. And probably until the next new moon, if you're looking at it from a lunar perspective. And then obviously on the 9th, I think that's today, we have moon near Pleiades. That's the Seven Sisters, that's near Taurus, and then Aldebaran, which is in the sign of Taurus. It's in the constellation of Taurus. So again, going from that Scorpio energy into the benefics, finding out what it is you want to actually fill up your cup with. And because the sun is still in Scorpio, there's kind of like a bit of continuous purging going on until we enter the season of Sagittarius, I would say. 1111, you're getting that beautiful numerological symbolism of wishes fulfilled. Again, that Aquarius to Pisces energy that we're going to be moving into later on in the winter. And then you consider that Mars just went retrograde on October 30th, won't be going direct until later in Capricorn season on January 12th of next year. So, and then we had Pluto go direct on October 6th. We had Saturn go direct on the 23rd of October, and Neptune will go direct finally on December 3rd. Pisces and Sagittarius are interesting because Pisces is now ruled by Neptune, was traditionally ruled by Jupiter. There's a kind of similar energy going on here. You have that Neptune, Poseidon, father of the sea kind of energy, mixing with the father of the mountains, the father of the sky, Zeus, where sea and sky meet on the horizon. So that is why Pisces is such a hopeful, optimistic, daydreamy sign, seeing things far off into the distance, what could be, head in the clouds a little bit even. And I think we're going to be seeing that with Mars in retrograde. We're going to be continuing some of that scorpionic purging energy. You're going to have to literally pause some of your routines and some of your things that you take for granted on a physical level, and the actions you take, the things you do, your methods, and reconsider how you go about things, not just how you think the way you would with Mercury retrograde, but literally how you do things, how you go about things when Mars is retrograde. So that's from now until January 12th, and then Neptune goes direct on December 3rd in the middle of all of this, which makes you have to consider now, while it's still in retrograde, how you go about trying to accomplish the things that are your dreams and deepest wishes. That resonates with this 1111 portal, of course, which is going to happen while Neptune and Mars are still in retrograde. And we'll have the moon in Cancer in its home sign. So kind of bringing it back home to what your emotional needs are and what makes you feel comfortable, and kind of considering how is that in alignment with your deepest wishes and fantasies and aspirations and hopes. So yeah, we'll see how this shows up with the tarot cards. But I think, and I know I mentioned a whole lot of seasons beyond just this lunar transit, but it's because it's like a string, right? It's all kind of woven into each other. And I think this is kind of a pivotal moment right now, this recent lunar eclipse that we've had. And there's a bit of an arc, right? It's going to move into, we're like at a crux point right now. This story isn't over until later in the beginning of December and then the middle of January, I would say. Probably especially when Neptune goes direct, though. I think that you're going to start seeing, you're going to start feeling forward momentum as you're reconsidering how you take action, to seeing your dreams actually starting to manifest because of all this Taurus energy going on, really kind of anchoring those dreams into something practically feasible. Okay, so I have rambled on about that, probably long enough. Oh, I did want to talk about one other thing. So I might leave a link about this. What's really interesting about the constellation of Scorpio is that even though at one point Samhain would have been rising, the sun behind the hill of Tara, probably closer to the cusp of Sagittarius, Scorpio and Libra and Sagittarius are all kind of mingled together in terms of constellations, as are Scorpio, Libra, and Virgo, because, and this is why I say as soon as you get to Virgo, this is when things start to change, right? And then it continues that way until the next mutable sign, in the sign of Sagittarius. There's your whole autumn season, then bam, beginning of winter, right before, you know, because the mutable signs are also called dual signs in Vedic astrology. They hold a little bit of what they were before and a little bit of what they're going to be after. Very beginning of Virgo season, you get those last dog days of summer, maybe some Indian summer, and then you start to have the changing of the leaves and the colors. In Sagittarius season, you might still have a little bit of those brown crunchy leaves on the ground that you're walking around with, and you might have that crisp autumn air before the first snow actually falls. So yeah, it's an interesting time. These mutable seasons, they're very much a liminal space of in between, right? And what's interesting is that the claws of the sign of Scorpio, in the constellation, in Arabic, they were called, the scales of Libra are where the claws of Scorpio used to be. They're called the left claw and the right claw as their own separate constellations in Arabic, and they continued to be well into the modern age, basically until Westernization kind of forced them to have to, you know, if astronomers and astrophysicists and other people wanted to talk with Westerners and scientists in the global community, they had to kind of start adopting language about the scales and other things. But they still have this concept in their culture about the right and left claw of the scorpion, because they're from this, you know, desert place, so that would have been more important to them. Those same scales, the claws of Scorpio, were traditionally a part of the constellation Virgo before Libra became its own constellation, and we had the 12 zodiacs and how we do astrology nowadays. That's like the virgin goddess Athena, right? I've said this before, how Virgo is not really a sign of purity and nitpickiness. It's the virgin goddesses. It's Hestia, it's Vesta, Athena, Artemis. Virgo is right near Cancer and Leo and the constellations of Orion. Artemis was known for having lifted Orion up into the sky and his dogs as a constellation. So Virgo is very much that virgin goddess energy, whether it's the huntress, Artemis, or Athena with her scales of justice. So Libra and Virgo were not considered separate constellations until the zodiac were basically starting to be formed. And now you kind of see why I talk about this arc of a storyline, right? Because you're going from Virgo season into Sagittarius season. And of course, Scorpio and Sagittarius are connected by the constellation of Ophiuchus. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. The large snake constellation that kind of hovers above Scorpio and Sagittarius. And I always kind of am reminded of the story of the Ouroboros, the large snake that can fit its tail. It's not that. It doesn't look like that. It's just very long. But it's long enough that it kind of reminds me of that cycle of death and rebirth, right? The snake that sheds its skin and eats its own tail can wrap itself all the way around the world. So yeah, I just figured that was going to be like a little bit more interesting to talk about as well, how all of those constellations sort of fit together and why it's not just during this one lunar transit that this energy is significant, why it's part of a bigger story of basically the whole season that we're going through up until Capricorn season starts, basically, I would say. All right, I've rambled on about that much too long. Let's go ahead and start pulling some tarot cards. I'm going to put a link in the description probably to say when the tarot starts. All right, Holy Spirit and ancestors, whether that's all saints, all souls, however you want to look at it, whatever your tradition is for the Samhain. What do the ancestors want to tell us about this season, this lunar transit, this eclipse we've just had, and going forward? Once again, I'm feeling called to take from the back of the deck. Okay, we have the Queen of Cups and the Ten of Wands, I believe. Okay. And then for the back of the deck, we have the Page of Wands. So that new beginning, Sagittarius energy I was talking about that we're going to be heading into. And so that's lovely. You know, that Jupiter Sagittarius energy is kind of what is going to be the door that's opened for us at the end of this purging Scorpionic season here. I just want to say right off the bat, while I was looking at this came up for me while I was shuffling earlier, and this immediately reminded me of, you know how in nomadic desert cultures, people would carry these large packs either on, or like even the steppes, right? In Mongolian territory. I'm just reminded of like people who either on horseback or with camels would get these huge packs of things. I mean, as much as they could reasonably carry, not as much as, you know, we would own nowadays, being stationary in a house, but carrying basically their livelihoods with them on their back. A lot of times the Ten of Wands is talked about as like a burden, and I think the ancestral message coming through here is that yes, we're in a season of purging and lightening the load a bit, but some things come to us now that we've carried throughout lifetimes, throughout generations, handed to us from our ancestors because they've tried to hand us what we need, right? They were surviving very harsh conditions. And especially with nomadic cultures, they carried their life with them so that they could survive, so that they could continue to preserve their culture, their way. The way that it's bundled together like this, it just is reminding me of that. And then we go immediately from that into the Seven of Cups, dreams and wishes, right? We're seeing bones of, I'm seeing different animals here, like a family of animals kind of intertwined here. So we're, you know, the gifts that they've tried to give to us, you know, our ancestors have given us both their blessings and their curses, right? Their bad habits and their good intentions. And I think part of this purging process, I've said this in another reading before when forgiveness comes up, because that can be a really trigger word for some people who do not feel obligated to forgive. If you have been through some really terrible things, you're not obligated to, and you don't have to. And it is not about them. It is about you. How are you able to lighten your load of things that are no longer serving you and what you don't need, so you can move into this childlike, refreshed, rebirthed energy, very creative and joyful. I think what this is saying, and we even have this like ancestral mother energy here with the Queen of Cups, a rib from around the heart, and I think this is a hip maybe. Yeah, this looks like the hip of some animal, and you can even see like up into the coccyx, the spine here, where people have had to be flexible, bend, literally open up, as in childbirth, in order to let something new emerge. So I'm seeing this as maybe a mix of having compassion for yourself, for the ways that maybe you have unconsciously repeated patterns, having compassion for the people who came before you, where maybe those patterns were useful for survival at one point in time, but maybe they're not now. At the same time as opening yourself up to new possibilities, you are going to be purging out a lot of things in order for life to be able to emerge within you. Like metaphorically as well, right? Being able to bring something into life, have something emerge. Three of Pentacles is about working together. We move from this, and that usually the Seven of Cups is like fantasy, right? But I'm seeing this as being like almost an intertwined kind of hodgepodge of a family. And then you move immediately into the Three of Pentacles. And I think that these bones have actually traditionally at one point been used as like clubs. So as tools, right? Before the invention of hammers and things. It could be a war club too, but even just as like a tool for creation. A very primitive tool for creation. And yeah. I almost thought that maybe some of these were flint stones as well, but maybe not. I think they're just river stones. Yeah, I'm seeing like a teamwork message here of being able to work with others from a place of having compassion, flexibility, forgiveness. That's not to say tolerating toxic behaviors or forgiving something that was horribly abusive that you're not ready to address in that way. Definitely not. But for a lot of people, I think since this is a collective reading, you may be feeling ready to say, you know what? Yeah, I've been carrying some burdens for too long. Now it's time to just take what I really need with me and let go of any bad patterns that I've inherited and appreciate the good blessings that I did have wherever I had them. So that, you know, this mother and child imagery here, something new can emerge. Something healthier. And that doesn't necessarily mean getting rid of certain people in your life. You know, we do still have this intertwined, happy, kind of embracing family here and this teamwork here. It might be new for some people. Maybe literally welcoming a new life if you've had, you know, a pregnancy. Or it could even just simply be, you know, making new connections and new friends, new team. It could also just be having better relation with the people who matter to you because you're able to purge some of these resentments, whatever it is that's being held on to here with the Ten of Wands. And I'm going to go ahead and get some clarifying cards. Opened up to the Ace of Vessels, so that's a very Queen of Cups type of energy as well with the Swan here. Okay. Oh my gosh, again, this was also something that came up earlier when I was shuffling. Knight of Arrows, then the Nine of Arrows. I don't know. Okay. Seven of Arrows, there you go. Then the Queen of Arrows. All arrows. Interesting. Okay, so we did have the Eight of Bows at the end there. Okay. So the bows are like the wands in the tarot. So some kind of joyful, happy message is coming up. This resonates really well with the Page of Wands on the back. Both basically wands. Some kind of happy change, something swiftly changing on the horizon here for the better, for joy. And then we have basically swords with the arrows. What's interesting to me is that the swan is like this very water energy. Makes me think of the Queen of Cups, actually. And yet, swans can fly. You know, there's a kind of bridging between emotion and thoughts that's here. The Queen of Swords in most decks is seen as almost kind of rigid, piercing, angry. In this deck, I see this as being something that's graceful and compassionate, but also very sharp mentally. Very quick on the uptake, right? And And I think it's interesting because she's in like a pond. So that's like very still waters, very calm emotions. There's some flowing here, but it's not like there's waves and a tempest or anything. We've got a willow tree here sapping up that water, but also healing and emotional wisdom. Being able to temper the emotions with the mind without necessarily getting rid of them. She's wading in those waters. She's in them. She's not denying it or pushing it away, but she's handling it in a wise way. And I think that's interesting that comes under teamwork. It's almost like saying, finding this ability to work with other people who they're not perfect either, you know, and neither are you. And being able to move past these insecurities of the Seven of Arrows, this feeling of being stuck and trapped. You have all this life that wants to emerge, but it's held back by insecurity. And then we have the Nine of Arrows, dedication, with the Knight of Arrows. So what's interesting to me is what it looks like is she's having maybe this insecurity here as well. It looks like she's like holding her bow backwards. She's got her eyes closed. All these other arrows are flying in all sorts of directions. It's like she's trying to learn how to use a bow and arrow correctly, or she's even maybe blindly going on intuition alone and not using skill and focus. And this Knight of Arrows is almost watching over her. It's on this like evergreen tree, a lot of patience, able to withstand a lot of time, and kind of just watching over her. She's got the feathers of this animal in her hair, almost just like saying that there's like an influence from this figure on her mind. And there's dedication here. I think it's almost like a mutual dedication, her to learning and kind of being willing to, this is a female, so feminine energy within the tarot, at least archetypally, not necessarily all people who actually exist, but as an archetype, very receptive. And she's still in this blue, but she's in this red cape or shawl as well. And in the tarot, you know, the Emperor, the Hierophant is red, red clothing, symbol of authority. So she's, underneath it, she has this deep intuition, this receptivity, this innocence to her, this connection to the divine. The blue is the color of the High Priestess. But above her is this mantle of authority. She's being called to take a role of leadership in some way, maybe not necessarily literal power in like a political sense, but or even like as a boss of business or anything. It could be that for some people, but I think it's more learning to lead by example, learning to lead by showing that you're capable of having these qualities, letting go of these insecurities, and having this wise balance between your emotions and your wisdom and your mind. Being able to swim within your emotions and acknowledge them and acknowledge what it is that you want, but being able to do so in a way where you're still able to work with other people, because you're wise and you know how to communicate with them well. I think she's learning this now, and it's interesting because she's older. She's not a child. Maybe it's almost like she's relearning. I find that very interesting. And we are at a time where I think maybe for a lot of us, we just got through a pretty difficult pandemic. A lot of people are probably stressing about elections right now in the United States. If you're in Europe, you're probably stressing a lot about the war in Ukraine still, and the impact that that's going to have on you. A lot of stressful, frankly, traumatizing things have been going on in the world. And even if you're not personally among the people who have been worse impacted, I think it's rattled a lot of people. It makes us feel insecure, unsure of how to move forward. Unsure of how to build upon this shaky ground. And I think the answer is, well, make sure that you're not on shaky ground anymore then. Figure out how to get off that shaky ground and build a firm foundation for yourself, even if everything else isn't firm, and then build from there. And because, you know, the bird trusts his own wings as much as the branch on the tree. You you know, this is a very stable evergreen tree, but he has his own stability within too. I think this is what this Nine of Arrows dedication person is learning, having the dedication to do that for herself. And for a lot of people, you might even have a mentor in your life in some way who is showing you how to do this for yourself as well. Yeah. So that's the tarot so far. Yeah, I like that because, and that's interesting because Jupiter is in the sign of Sagittarius, representative of the 9th house, very much the archetype of the teacher. So there's some learning going on here, as well as embodying your best self. And it's interesting that this comes up under the 10 of Wands. It's almost like she's, and it's going backwards towards the back of her mind with her eyes closed, and all of these arrows are just being pinged back into the forest. I think she's purging some unconscious things in this process. Because maybe it's not that she's not already smart and wise. She's got the same energy as this swan over here. Feathers, the blue. But, you know, I think even a willow tree here of some kind. But she's releasing all of these arrows, all of these thoughts from her subconscious so that she can learn how to better aim her arrow. She's holding a bow as well. Not all of the arrows cards have a bow in it. She's this emotional creature who's holding on to her passions, but she's not doing so quite in this jubilant way as in here, which is coming on the horizon with the being the back of the deck energy. But she's kind of holding it tenderly. Her dreams, her passions, her hopes, her aspirations, and she's focusing on honing herself, the skill first, and then moving forward into that. All right, and now we're just going to go ahead and start pulling some oracle cards for this reading. Any messages from, here we go with the fire again, bride, mother, security. We were talking about that Taurus energy of security, but also creation and you know, creativity, vitality, that very fiery Sagittarius energy of the moon having been near Jupiter recently. Okay, let's see. The Hill Fort. Oh my God. And the maze. And do I want to pull a third one? Yes. Okay. Oh my gosh, the salmon. Wisdom. There we go. There's a Celtic story of the salmon that eats from the tree of wisdom the nuts of the hazelnut tree and grows spots on it for every hazelnut that it eats that falls into the water. Yes, we have individuality going against the flow. I think that was kind of what we were talking about here is, and this is kind of coming over top of the Hill Fort. Sorry, the Hill Fort's coming over top of that 10 of Wands energy as well. I think this is speaking of, and it's interesting to me because this isn't necessarily the Hill of Tara, but I'm reminded of the Hill of Tara, how we've built our lives. These are living people. And then the burial mounds, the dead are underneath, right? In the ground. We've built our lives on the foundations of the people who came before us. So we have refuge, safety, security. And then the maze, confusion, choices, life paths, right? Coming out of this energy of just taking for granted these things, obviously being grateful, but also kind of parsing out for ourselves which way to go from here with some wisdom and sense of individuality, sense of what it is we actually want for ourselves. What patterns can we let go of by having that introspection and realizing what have we taken on that's not our own, but comes from those who came before us. And we'll just do some more ancestral guidance with these. The cup, Queen of Cups. Okay. Sorry I'm sighing quite a lot. I've just had a week. 32. Huh. I'm reminded of the child in the Page of Wands with that. I think that's probably actually an ancestor, but I'm just reminded of the child in the wands. I think it's because of the greenery and around it, the new life that's emerging from it. Oh my gosh, the ship. Wow. And we have the drum. So yeah, I think, and this is getting in touch with trance and the subconscious and that ancestral wisdom as well. This almost reminds me of exactly that. It's just repeating the same thing. That, right, in order for new life to emerge, it has to be built on foundations that came before it. But there's also this sense of diving into your subconscious and, you know, getting in touch with that ancestral wisdom and maybe working out the ancestral, whatever you want to call it, orlog, weird, karma, just patterns even. If you want to look at it from a scientific perspective, you know, the genetic and behavioral patterns we've adapted and carry from our elders. But yeah, I'm just seeing that as a repeating message right there. New life being able to emerge from a mixture of letting go of what no longer serves and kind of being grateful for what you've been given that does, that has helped. You know, and we all have something to be grateful for. None of us were born, I would imagine nobody watching this was born in a cave and had to grow up like a Neanderthal. You have something to be grateful for. You've been given something that made your life easier, even if it was hard in a lot of ways. So just find something to have some gratitude for, even if you don't, you know, want to be focusing on that right now because you're dealing with difficulty. Acknowledge that difficulty and also acknowledge your blessings. Having that balance helps. It helps give perspective. And that perspective helps you to not feel helpless so that you can actually do something towards building what you actually want. Let's see what else wants to come through from our spirit guides here. Oh my gosh, the Queen of Spades is very similar to the Queen of Arrows. That's Medusa. We were talking about Saturn earlier. I think this is the Quilin or something, however you say that, the creature from Chinese mythology. That is the Queen of Hearts. Let's see what else wants to come through here. Seven of Spades. Okay, and or the Kirin, however you say it, Chinese or Japanese mythology. Basically, the emperor was said to have this being, it's kind of like the Japanese version of or Chinese even version of a unicorn. It has like the hide of a dragon, body of a deer or horse, and horns. And it's said to only come around to signify the coming of a new, very heavenly blessed emperor or something like that. But it's basically just a symbol of divine intervention, divine guidance, blessings that have come from those before you, I think, coming over top of these two cards. And with it being in the sign of the, not the sign of, in the card of the Queen of Hearts, I think this is right, because gratitude is one of those things that opens up your heart space. So just having a sense of gratitude, awe, and wonder, and able to let go of some of those insecurities. This is the Seven of Spades right on top of the Seven of Arrows. Now, normally I would say, and it is kind of overlapping with that Three of Pentacles work concept as well, that teamwork concept. Spades are in the poker decks a little less combative than swords. They're a tool of labor rather than a tool of war. You know, you use a spade or a shovel basically to dig things, to create things. I would say because it's still in the element of air and the mind, it's digging into the subconscious. Digging into the subconscious in order to work through those things so that you can work through things more consciously as well, so that you can work on the things that you want instead of reacting from a subconscious place in your patterns, doing so in a conscious, graceful way. And that's what I think this is here, because this is a very regal energy, and this is a very regal energy as well. With the Queen of Hearts here, it's not just being a... it's not just about being compassionate and sweet like the Queen of Cups would be. She still carries herself, this Keelim, the way a Queen of Swords would. You know, wise, astute, poised, graceful. But there's also some compassion here as well. And then with the Queen of Spades here, this is a little bit different than I might consider other Queen of Spades in other decks. Because we do have Medusa here. I feel like this is about also working out fears, because Medusa is a symbol of fear and punishment and sadness, really. Her story is very sad, how Medusa was once a priestess of the Temple of Athena, and she was assaulted, and she was turned into a Gorgon. Depending on how you interpret that story, either Athena punished her instead of hearing her and listening to her and giving her a more honored space, or she did this for her own benefit so that no man could ever touch her again. That's a bit trigger warning right there. But if something like that's ever happened to you, that has happened to me as well. I, for one, can vouch that I personally would not want to never be touched again. I would just never want to be touched disrespectfully again. So there's almost a real tragic sadness to this Queen of Spades. And it's coming over, of all things, this child energy I was seeing. The Queen of Cups, this very fertile energy. Wisdom, happiness, joy, this leaping happy salmon. And it's almost like saying, because this is the last thing that's coming up and it's covering everything else, it's like blocking, right? This might be a block for some people, this feeling of anguish, overprotectiveness. I know that's something I've personally had to work through. But since this is a collective reading, maybe a lot of people have been having to deal with that lately. You know, like I was saying, pandemic and other things that have gone on have been very stressful. It can rile up some very primordial fears of survival and other things in us. I think this has gone on long enough that now we realize, hey, a lot of us are still here. We can get through this. Some tragic things have happened along the way, though. And I think that it can leave a lot of people feeling guarded to the point where their eyes are turning other people to stone, right? You're not letting anything touch you. You're not letting anything in. But there's a point where you have to be able to be receptive. You have to be able to swim in those waters. It's almost like saying this is diametrically opposed to this, right? Saying that you can choose to be like this, poised, but still within those emotions, not able to be messed around with because you're wise. Or maybe in your attempt to be wise and work things out, you're having to work through some of this feeling of defensiveness. Perhaps feeling punished unjustly by others or judged, in order to be able to find what is this family, this teamwork, whatever it is for you that actually helps. And that is a very Scorpionic thing to have to work through. That is your shadow side being cleared out. This is difficult energy, but it's important to address. And that's why we're going through this season. All right. So leaving that alone for now. Yeah, I was going to go ahead. I'm going to do the bones at the end just because it's hard to lay them down on top of, lay these down on top of the bones. We'll do the moonology right now. So what is coming forward for us for the rest of this season? Oh my. Maybe I'll take from the top of that. Yeah, what do you need to release? And we're in that waning moon energy right now, right after the eclipse. What do you need to release? Of course. What else is coming forward for us after this eclipse energy? This one feels like it wants to come out. Luck is on your side, new moon in Sagittarius. What was I saying? That Jupiter energy with the moon having been near Jupiter recently. Okay, we'll take them both. You're very close to achieving your goal, gibbous moon. And surrender to the divine, full moon. Okay, and we did just have a full moon eclipse. I like that that's coming over top of each of these because this looks like a dark new moon, but of course the full moon looks dark when you're in the middle of an eclipse. And I would say even almost, you're very close to achieving your goal. This is when the moon was waxing right before the eclipse. And this is right afterwards, heading from fall, this clear sky, this evergreens, and then we're getting the snow going into Sagittarius season after Scorpio. What do you need to release? That's what's being worked out right now. And it's coming right over top of that Queen of Arrows, like what I was talking about here. What do you need to release? Luck is on your side. You're very close to achieving your goal. And I think what needs to be released is maybe this feeling of needing to have control. What do you need to release? Surrender to the divine. If you're being overprotective or holding on to too many resentments, find some gratitude. Don't gaslight yourself or fail to acknowledge how you feel about what you've been through, because it's valid to feel the way you feel. But also maybe give some of those feelings up to the divine. Pray on them, do a ritual, meditate, whatever it is you do to kind of say, okay, this is how I feel, but this isn't just mine anymore. I'm giving it to higher powers than me to help me heal through this. So yeah, and then we're gonna end off on some bones. We're gonna do some bones. Let's just move that. We had that hip energy come up with the Queen of Cups card earlier. And I feel like some of these are actually splintered pieces of bones. This is actually... It looks flat, but it's actually, I remember this is actually part of the leg bone of an animal. And this is not the toe, it's a piece of a jaw. I think this as well is part of the mouth. And I think this was also splintered off of a piece of an arm. So... you know, your arms and legs. What are you carrying? What are you carrying? What is your burden? What are you walking with, carrying on your back? It's interesting that we're having this mouth and hip energy. So I've said before, I don't know if I've said it in these videos before, but I've said it before in writing and elsewhere, that the vagus nerve of the body connects along the spine, the jaw, and the hips. So when you're tense in your hips, you tend to be tense in your jaw. If you grind your jaw, you tend to have tension in your hips. If you have tension in your hips from a leg injury, it tends to result in a tension in the jaw over time. So what is that symbolically in a spiritual sense? Well, your throat chakra and your sacral chakra, your creativity, your joy, your ability to manifest and bring things into reality, connected to your voice. And also the throat chakra isn't just the throat. It also encompasses the ears, the eyes, the physical two eyes, whereas the third eye is the eye within you, the subconscious, the intuition. The throat chakra encompasses the two physical eyes. It encompasses all of the physical senses that are within that general zone. Eyes, ears, nose, mouth, throat, breath. So it's your thinking patterns, how you communicate, how you see and sense the world with your rational mind, or what you think is rational based on prior experience, perhaps. if you haven't used your third eye to work through any subconscious things that may be influencing your rational processes. I'm seeing this as being about unloading anything that is making your legs and arms weary from carrying so much in the mind. It may be things that people have told you that you've taken for granted, conventional wisdom, things that maybe were parroted and said without thinking too clearly, and loosening that up. I'm seeing that maybe for some people dance or some kind of physical movement, yoga, qigong, or qigong, however you say that, can be helpful in helping to release some of this by getting out of your head, working through the subconscious, and also getting grounded into the body through some kind of exercise, something that helps you to release nervous energy physically so that you can clear the mind, and then you can kind of come back to addressing these rational processes. Work on your foundations first, right? This is the second chakra, right above the root. So you've already got that root, those foundations from your ancestors, the things you've been given. And we have, I think, came over Manas, might have come over Lagus, and the Auric, basically, the bull, is where I saw things kind of falling on top. It might have also been on Yera as well. So you're ending that harvest season and you're entering a new year. You literally Samhain is the new year. You know, you have the man that rides the horse here, right? This is the man who, because of traditionally this would have represented a bridle, later a tunic. How are you riding through your subconscious? Because Sleipnir is able to go through the realm of death, feared things. And then you have the stability, Taurus energy, fertility, abundance. You know, you're carrying some blessings as well as some difficult things from the people who came before you. And I like that this kind of comes over top of the head here as well. Thinking process, the head of the horse, and this comes over top of the leg area and the hip. Kind of worked out great how that was put down. Yeah, so just find ways to be grateful. You know, accept that an old cycle is closing and that a new one can begin, and just work through those subconscious things, perhaps through some kind of physical movement, because the bull is obviously also a symbol of physical exertion as well. Yeah, I'm seeing like a symbol of almost like that salmon earlier about individuality, coming to be in touch with who you are as a person, actualizing yourself as a human being, not just as one more cog in the wheel of who you've been a part of as a group of other people. It's through finding a balance between your individuality, that salmon, and this Three of Pentacles, that you can get unstuck. I think it might have also come up over, okay, so it flipped onto Kanas and Isa. So the torch that's able to melt the ice a bit, feeling less stuck, finding your own creative spark as an individual, and letting that help heal you of any subconscious things, letting go of things that are not yours to hold on to, and then you're able to reintegrate as part of the group. Okay. Yes, I do believe that that is our reading. I hope you guys have had a pleasant Samhain, pleasant solar eclipse and lunar eclipse, and that you guys have a great rest of this season heading on into December. I will see you guys next month.